up, and if everybody is ready, I have a 7-minute speech. Great. 7 minutes, and we'll start now. We affirm the resolution that the provisions of the National Labor Relations Act banning wildcat strikes ought to be repealed. A wildcat strike, as a definition, is a work stoppage undertaken without the explicit permission of the union that workers are part of. 2 observations before moving into our contentions. Firstly, strikes in general are risky undertakings, with wildcat strikes especially so. Unbanning wildcat strikes would protect workers who do so from getting fired, but would not ensure them pay from either the union or the company that strike from. Secondly, it's important to note that wildcat strikes are used as a last resort. Workers who undertake them do not get paid, so these actions are uncommon and extremely risky for everyone involved. However, they are extremely necessary. Our first contention is about the effectiveness of wildcat strikes. Unionized strikes ultimately cause less change than those that are unexpected, for a few reasons. Firstly, longer strikes. The longer a strike goes on, the more likely it is for a union to drop support and for the workers involved to stop having their rights protected. For example, in 2018, teachers in West Virginia went on a strike for wages and health coverage. These teachers were not getting paid enough, and their health was not doing well. However, the strike went on for too long, and many who continued were fired as they lost union support, leading to no demands met. Their employers in the union did not reach negotiation. However, these teachers still did not receive good compensation and good health coverage. This is one such instance where wildcat strikes are much more effective. Secondly, preparation. When companies are aware of times that workers are going to strike, the work stoppages are much less likely to have any significant effect. Past strikes have seen companies hire non-unionized workers to prepare for upcoming strikes, or release propaganda campaigns to turn the public against the upcoming strikers. Wildcat strikes and their unexpected natures are ultimately far more effective in these regards, as companies are forced to deal with shortages of work on short notice, forcing them into action. If companies know when their unionized workers are going to strike, they simply refill the shifts during that time. Thus, it completely eliminates the reason for the strike. If the company can still work during the time of the strike, then they're not going to grant their unionized workers the help that they need. Thus, with the preparation of other strikes, there's not as effective as wildcat strikes, especially in times when workers severely need their rights to be met. Now, our second contention talks about the reason why these wildcat strikes need to be legal. Wildcat strikes, as we mentioned before, are used as a last resort when workers have exhausted their negotiations with their employers and union and feel that their grievances are not being heard or addressed by their employer or union. Wildcat strikes are a powerful tool for workers to exert pressure on their employers, and without this tool, workers are left without options to do so. By making them illegal, workers are penalized by losing their jobs after wildcat striking, meaning that if they're being abused in the workplace and not being listened to, or they're not in the union, they're left with 2 options there. First, they can continue to work and experience the abuse or undercompensation or unright workplace laws that they have been working with, that they're trying to get rid of, or they can wildcat strike and lose their job entirely. This puts workers in a place where they have no good options. However, with wildcat strikes being legal, they would not have this repercussion after the wildcat strike. In fact, with the wildcat strikes, as we mentioned their effectiveness, this would grant workers who are being abused a third option: to wildcat strike, get their needs and rights met, heard, and given to them, and that they can work in a safe work environment where they are not abused and where they still have a job. In extremely harmful situations in which workers cannot get anyone to listen to their story and help them, wildcat strikes are the only hope for them to have a better life. Now, I've been talking about how when unions and employers don't listen to their workers, This is when wildcat strikes are needed. Now, they're also needed when people don't have the unions that can help them secure their jobs. Many workers, mainly the disadvantaged and low income, aren't able to join unions at all. Unions require workers to pay in order for them to join the union. Because unions, when they protect their rights, they have to pay out the leaders of the union, the people who organize the union, and thus these workers need to pay money to get into it. However, low income and disadvantaged workers do not even have the money to join a union. Thus, they are nowhere represented with these strikes that are already allowed. However, wildcat strikes would give them another option in order to better attain respectful and good workplace environments. Thus, the reason we need to have a gov ballot, the reason that wildcat strikes ought to be repealed, is because they are absolutely necessary for them to be legal. They are more effective than other strikes, which we explained. When other strikes go on for too long, the workers, their rights under the strike are not protected anymore. Thus, they do not gain the benefits and the rights that they needed from the strike. When strikes are prepared, as opposed to wildcat strikes, it essentially eliminates most of the strike's effect, as employers can simply employ other workers to replace the unionized workers' jobs, and thus there's no effect. Now, wildcat strikes need to be legal for employees to be able to do this, for employees to have their voices heard, for employees to have their rights given back to them, for employees to stop being abused under workplace conditions. They need to be legal so that employees have a third option, so that their options aren't only to continue being abused or to completely lose their job. They need the third option where their voices are heard, their rights are met, and they can continue working in a good workplace environment where they have good rights, where they're being heard, where they have good healthcare, good coverage, and everything. Thus, I strongly urge a gov ballot.
Okay, thank you. I have an 8-minute speech coming up. Brief after roadmap. I'm just gonna go on case then off case. Go through my case first, and then I'll respond to my opponents. So if everyone's ready, I'll start my 8-minute speech on my first word. Resolution. The provisions of the National Labor Relations Act banning wildcat strikes ought to be repealed. We agree with all definitions. How we define this round to be a value round, and our criteria is net benefits for society. Disadvantage or counterchange 1. Weakens unions. Uniqueness. Wildcat strikes undermine collective bargaining. Internal links. Loss of bargaining power. Unplanned and uncoordinated wildcat strikes can weaken a union's bargaining power by undermining the union's ability to negotiate with management effectively. Individually striking with the case of wildcat strikes holds no bargaining power, as a company can afford to lose a couple employees. However, unions make it large scale. When management sees that they can negotiate with individual workers instead of the union, they will be less willing to make concessions to the union in future negotiations. 2. Negative public perception. Wildcat strikes can damage the public's perception of labor unions. If the public sees unions as causing disruptions or being unable to control their members, it may be more difficult for the union to gain support for their cause. Divisions within the union. Wildcat strikes can create divisions within a union, with some members supporting the strike and others opposing it. Lack of coordination. Wildcat strikes are typically unplanned and lack coordination with labor union leadership. Impacts. Legitimacy. Collective bargaining is a recognized and legal process for negotiating employment terms between employers and employees or their representatives. It operates within established legal framework and regulation, and it typically involves formal negotiations, often facilitated by labor unions. On the other hand, wildcat strikes are unauthorized and unofficial strikes that occur outside the established procedures of labor union without their official endorsement. Wildcat strikes can be seen as lacking the legitimacy and legal protections that collective bargaining offers. Sustainability. Collective bargaining is a sustained and ongoing process that allows for continuous negotiations and engagement between workers and employers, and it involves long-term relationship between labor unions and employers with established procedures for resolving dispute. In contrast, wildcat strikes are often spontaneous and short-term actions that will not be sustainable in the long run. Disadvantage 2. Masking. Uniqueness. Union working together in force is the best way to outweigh corporate greed. Individual strikes creating disruptions only lead to mass shutdowns. For example, in the education sector, in 2018, a wildcat strike by public school teachers in West Virginia resulted in the closure of schools for 9 days, affecting over 270,000 students and their families. The strike led to widespread disruptions in the education system, public transportation. Wildcat strikes by public transportation workers, such as bus drivers or subway workers, have resulted in mass shutdowns or disruptions in public services.
POI.
Enough time. For example, in 2019, a wildcat strike by bus drivers resulted in the suspension of bus services for several days. Labor union strikes are different in that they notify people like 2-3 weeks beforehand. Oh, we're gonna strike, and it's abiding by a legal framework. Links. Repealing the ban would mean there's no coordination for strikes and only further masks the problem. Internal links. The opposition agrees that strikes are important and will still happen, but wildcat strikes will not solve what the workers hope to achieve, but only serve to incite violence and create disruption. Recently, the LAUSD organized and planned to notify the district and parents of the strike weeks in advance, allowing parents to find daycare if needed. However, if this was a wildcat strike where teachers walked out on the day, children are going to come to school where there is no teachers present for supervision, and parents would have to come home from work and arrange care. Impacts: economic disruption of school. Children are going to be put in harm's way. Negative public perception. Wildcat strikes will not receive widespread public support, especially if they are perceived as unauthorized and disruptive. Disadvantage 3. Wildcat strikes decrease union coordination. Uniqueness. Wildcat strikes can remove union coordination by bypassing the established union structure and leadership. This leads to a lack of communication and coordination between workers, as well as a lack of clear demands and negotiation strategy. The result is a fragmented and weakened labor movement with individual workers pursuing their own interests rather than working together as a collective. Internal links. The 2020 General Motors strike. In 2020, the United Auto Workers members at General Motor plants went on a wildcat strike over safety concerns related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The strike was not authorized by the United Auto Workers leadership, which had reached an agreement with General Motors on a new contract. The wildcat strike resulted in some confusion and conflict between striking workers and those who continued to work, and ultimately did not lead to any significant changes in the terms of the contract. The lack of coordination between striking workers and the union leadership weakened the union's bargaining power. 2018 wildcat strikes in the US. In 2018, a wave of wildcat strikes took place in various industries in the US, including education, hospitality, and transportation. These strikes were largely driven by low wages and a lack of job security. However, due to lack of union coordination, the strike did not lead to any lasting changes or improvements. Impacts. This removes coordination as some people are striking, some people are following the union, which leads to divisions and dispute with no one at the end of the day getting any wage benefits. Disruption to essential services. Unorganized strikes can disrupt essential services such as transportation, healthcare, public safety, and other critical sectors. This can result in inconvenience, safety concerns, and economic losses. For example, wildcat strikes on the dot in public transportation can disrupt commuting for a large number of people. At the end of the day, we want workers to achieve their presented grievances, and we hope that their voices are heard. However, if this is unplanned, public service workers would risk the larger society, disrupt businesses, and slow down the entire economic system. Yes, we're taking enough time. Workers' grievances should be heard, but not while public safety is put in harm's way. Now going on to my opponent's case. My opponent's first contention was on the effectiveness of wildcat strikes, right? They talk about how union strikes cause less change and longer strikes and union drop support. They talk about teachers going on for a strike. And they talk about how there's no significant effect. I have a few responses to this. First, union strikes do work. We've proven with the LAUSD example that they were able to get more benefits, and there are no warrants that it doesn't work. For example, the UPS worker strike worked in 1997, and the USPS union worker strike worked in 1970. The AF gives the example of Virginia teachers striking using wildcat strikes. Let's look at the extreme negative consequences for the public, parents, and school students. Again, missed instructional time and challenges for working parents and families. The public often always takes the side of a union organized if the union organizes strikes, and wildcat strikes create inconvenience for the public, and that's when they lose public support, and that's why they lose public support, because people are not notified. They're going on the line. The contention 2 was on why wildcat strikes need to be legal, because they're used as a last result. Workers feel like the grievances are not heard, and workers are left with two options. They continue to experience abuse and undercompensation. However, wildcat strikes are not illegal by law. It's just not advised against by unions. Again, unions are formed by the workers for the workers. And wildcat strikes are not 100% effective because it limits bargaining power. Refer back to my previous examples where I tell you the General Motors example. They've already achieved a contract agreement, yet they still went on a wildcat strike, which led to no long-term effects. And wildcat strikes could get attention to their cause, but with that attention comes the negative consequences, right? Stronger employer pushback, lack of public support, and legal action of firing by employers. Again, they talk about how people can't afford to pay union fees. However, if workers aren't part of unions, wildcat strikes would get the message across, yes, but wildcat strikes cannot protect workers from getting fired. Wildcat strikes are not necessary for effectively naming their grievances, and once wildcat strikes become legal, the striking workers are not protected against employer backlash. And turn this against the AF, as it often results in more negative consequences for the workers and the public. As, again, named above, just because it becomes legal does not mean they have the same protection as unions. Thank you.
All right, 8-minute Gov rebuttal speech. Second speaker, Christopher Choi from Palo Alto. Time will start now. On top of case, let's first address the key observations that we provided at the start of today's debate. Firstly, it's that strikes are risky undertakings, and secondly, that they're a last resort. This means that in general, strikes are very extremely risky undertakings that do not occur very frequently. In addition, wildcat strikes themselves are extraordinarily risky because they don't even receive payment from the union fund itself. These are done in basic desperation. They're done as an act of a last resort, and they're done in response to major abuses. As a result, we can see that the impacts of actually legalizing wildcat strikes are minimal. But that's precisely why we do need to make wildcat strikes legal and protected once more. So firstly, let's address their assertion on the value round on net societal benefit. Well, our opponents didn't disagree with the observations in their responses, meaning that effectively we can see that strikes are a last resort. But if they do agree that strikes are important, if they do agree that we should have strikes as legal and beneficial to the workers, then that means that they aren't achieving their value of net societal benefit either, because at a base level, striking itself is not beneficial to society. Strikes are inherently selfish actions that are done by workers when they have no other alternatives. They're done because workers want to have better rights, they want a better workplace, and they want better pay. Judge, net societal benefit isn't occurred when you undergo a strike. If our opponents wanted to achieve societal benefit at all, then they would argue that strikes are not important, strikes should not occur. But since they do agree that strikes are important, since they do agree that workers do deserve to have these rights, we have to evaluate this round from a lens of not net societal benefit, but ensuring these workers' rights. That is the more important way that we ought to evaluate today. All right, let's talk about how wildcat strikes supposedly weaken unions. That was our opponent's first point. They talk about how unplanned strikes weaken bargaining power. However, I don't really see the logic behind that. They also say that wildcat strikes are done by a slight marginal amount of the union. It's a small portion of them. Therefore, there's no real material impact on the unions. Like if 10 people want to go on strike with no pay from either the union or their institution, I say they go for it. But do they really deserve to be fired for it? If 10 people are being abused under the workplace and the larger union decides their problem isn't worth addressing, then those 10 people have no alternative in the status quo. Those 10 people cannot engage in any form of societal change simply because of the fact that wildcat strikes are not protected. Unions do seem like benevolent entities, but they are fundamentally looking out for the greater good. But we shouldn't just ignore those 10 people who are suffering underneath everything with the union completely ignoring them. As a result, should those 10 people be fired just because they're striking for their rights? Should we fire those 10 people who are being abused just because the union doesn't want to follow them? Under the world of the Gov, we say no. Wildcat strikes, remember, as our opponents say, are not a large amount of people. Therefore, we can't say that they'll weaken bargaining power. If 10 people go on strike, that's not going to limit the bargaining power of the union whatsoever. All we're doing is ensuring that those 10 people have their jobs protected and they can actually at least protest and feel like they're making some form of a material benefit. That's the most important point here. Nextly, let's talk about disruptions. They talk about how wildcat strikes specifically cause these massive violent disruptions in society. Lots of huge issues, teachers come home, teachers leave schools completely without any warning. But remember the definition of a wildcat strike. It's strikes without the permission of an employer. There's no reason why wildcat strikes have to be completely unexpected, why wildcat strikes have to be completely just off the nose. Wildcat strikes can be notified in advance. They're basically just done without the approval of a union. Judge, there's simply no impact here. It doesn't logically follow that the teachers wouldn't just let the parents know in the first place. And even if you agree with our opponents that effectively wildcat strikes do have these impacts, they're non-unique because of the fact that strikes themselves cause massive societal disruption. Again, refer back to how this round ought to be evaluated. It's not net societal benefit because they agree strikes are important. And if strikes are important, then their impacts should be allowed. Therefore, because wildcat strikes cause the exact same impacts, just on a smaller scale, there's no reason why disruptions are any worse in the gov than on the neg here. All right, let's lastly address how it causes divisions within unions. Judges, there's multiple of you. Again, divisions will already exist within these unions. Like, not every single worker strikes when there's a strike occurring, when there's a planned strike, when there's a union strike. It's not like every single member of the union will go on strike at once. Divisions already exist, and those 10 people, like I said, deserve the right to strike if the rest of the union decides that it's not within their wheelhouse to do so. As in summary, wildcat strikes don't actually weaken bargaining power whatsoever. We can't look at wildcat strikes as if they'll cause a massive impact because of the fact that our opponents agree that strikes are important. All right. Nextly, we address damage perspective of the public, the second point. Again, they say that we reduce legitimacy. They say that there's no coordination, but 10 people who are suffering and don't get the union's approval will not be able to strike without wildcat strikes allowed. And the legitimacy argument can be thrown out as well because 10 people striking won't cause a large impact. And also, the simple fact that strikes exist at all and that our opponents agree that strikes are important means that this point should not be considered whatsoever, because if strikes are disruptive, so are wildcat strikes. Wildcat strikes are just disruptive on a smaller scale. Next, we talk about sustainability. Strikes are spontaneous and short somehow. Wildcat strikes can be sustained, again, just without approval of a union. You can wildcat strike for as long as you want. There's no actual uniqueness here. Also, you're going to give advance notice if you're a teacher. It's just without permission of the union. That's our definition. That was unrefuted, meaning, again, no impact here. They talk about how they harm the people. Strikes harm the people. Wildcat strikes will also harm the people, but on a lower scale. We're just ensuring that those people who need their rights but don't have the union support are able to strike in the first place. Puts kids in harm's way. Again, they can just tell the people who they're addressing. And lastly, they talk about removing coordinations again, societal benefits again, and how basically wildcat strikes are bad for safety. They result in confusion and no significant change. But firstly, aren't the workers not in the union? If they disrupt the union so much, why are they wildcat striking? Like, there's no reason why people not in the union striking should disrupt the union's bargaining power at all. Again, you can also refer to my refutations to their first point. In addition, again, small-scale strikes, we're just ensuring that those people who are being suppressed, who are being ignored by the union, are able to address their problems on an individual scale without danger of being fired. This is a last resort. This is infrequent. Our opponents also specifically state that wildcat strikes are smaller subgroups of the unions themselves, or they aren't even union affiliated. So why should those people not be designated these same rights as everyone else? They deserve the right to stand up for the rights as well. Right, some brief responses, just defending our own case. Firstly, they talk about how union strikes do work. However, firstly, not all the time. We've shown you a couple of examples, such as the Virginia teacher strike. And again, not all strikes are functional because ultimately union strikes are just not as being expected, allows for preparation time, and sometimes they can't work. Secondly, they're infrequent. Like, do these workers deserve to be fired? Union strikes should be allowed, but so should wildcat strikes. There's no offense here against our case. They talk about how wildcat strikes aren't illegal. They literally are. That's what the resolution's about. And how wildcat strikes aren't 100% effective. But Judge, it's just supposed to be those people who need it. Lastly, they talk about negative results. We won't protect them for keeping work. They will protect them for keeping work. That's the point of the resolution. For all these reasons, strongly urge a gov ballot.
Okay, thank you. Before I begin, obviously, thank you, judges, thank you, opponents. My name is Shenpo Lee. I am the second negation speaker. If everyone is ready, I will give an off-time roadmap and then I'll begin my 8-minute speech. So off-time roadmap, I'll make myself as clear as possible as I move along this debate. I'll point out the points of clash, and then I'll just be overall laying out both cases and weighing both cases, responding to the line by line. And if everyone's ready, my 8 minutes will begin now. So So, Judge, first of all, let's look at the top of the flow. The second affirmation speaker brings in the weighing mechanism point. They talk about how there's no harms in legalizing wildcat strikes. However, Judge, we have proven there has been the negation has proven damages through the affirmations examples of the 2018 Virginia teacher strike. That is a wildcat strike mentioned by their first affirmation speaker, and my partner has already responded to that with the negative consequences following that, following those wildcat strikes. I'll emphasize on that point later. So, Judge, we proved that there is unique harm of legalizing wildcat strikes. The damages done by the wildcat strikes back in 2018 through the Virginia teacher walkout, which is labeled as by the affirmation as a wildcat strike. We've shown the damages. We've proven that families. We've proven that students have missed instructional time, and there's challenges for working parents and families. Those are the damages. Those are the unique I'll take it in at time of a wildcat strikes with the example given by the affirmation. Next, they move on to the weighing mechanism. They talk about how we both concede to the fact where strikes are worse. Are not net beneficial for society. Hence, we have to look at the weighing mechanisms through workers' rights. Judge, let's concede to their point. Let's continue the point, and later on I'll prove why we win both the weighing mechanism of social net benefits and workers' rights benefits, which is what they want to weigh on and what the affirmation wants to win through. So, Judge, the weighing mechanism is now workers' right. Judge, we still win through the workers' rights argument if we don't repeal the ban of wildcat strikes. Wildcat strikes, by definition, by the affirmation proven to them, and the points that they continue to make afterwards, and the impact on the links that they use to prove why wildcat strikes should be the ban should be repealed. It says that basically wildcat strikes gives the minority, gives the 10 people in the working group, even though that's not true. Wildcat strikes occur on a larger scale. There's no way 10 people can afford to create a wildcat strike. That's simply not called a strike. That's simply called 10 people protesting a company's policies. That's not called a strike. The strike is a large-scale movement that's created by a group of people voicing their grievances. 10 people does not account for a strike, and 10 people will never be able to form both a union strike or a wildcat strike. So let's just take the 10 people as an example, even though I've proven why that simply cannot be the case in any of our worlds. If their first speaker mentioned how people who participate in wildcat strikes can't afford to pay the union fees because if you want to participate in a union strike, if you want to be protected under a union in your workplace, you have to pay a union fee. Judge, so let's take an example. If these people, if the people who wanted to strike through a wildcat strike are not part of a union and they do strike once wildcat strikes are quote unquote like repealed or unbanned or made legal, these workers are still not protected under the union rights. Through workers' rights, yes, their grievances might be heard. Their grievances might be given to the company. However, when the company comes back, when these workers come back to work, they are not protected under union rights. That means they can still get fired. They can the company can still pursue legal consequences. That does not mean the workers get their rights. Yes, they advocated for the grievances. They made their grievances heard. However, workers' rights are still not being respected. Once they come back to work, the employers can simply fire them because they were not part of the union to begin with, Judge. Under the affirmation's assumption about wildcat strikes being the minority, being these people who are suffering at these horrible work conditions, who cannot afford to be part of the union, to be a part of a larger union strike, Judge, under the affirmation's assumption, we still solve better for workers' right, because if worker strikes are done through a union, done through organization, done through cooperation, done through collective bargaining, that holds a much stronger power for both the company, the workers, and the public sector. That leads me on to the net beneficial argument, Judge. The affirmation has claimed how we are locked out of our net beneficial argument because strikes are ultimately a net consequence for society. However, Judge, I like to provide you several examples to why that's not true. First of all, again, going line by line, they talk about how they should not ignore the 10 people. But again, these 10 people, if they're want to participate in a wildcat strike, they're not protected under the unions. They cannot claim that these people are going to be protected under unions once wildcat strikes are made legal. Once wildcat strikes are still not a guaranteed protection under unions as under the National Labor Relations Act. There's no clause saying that the unions have to protect workers who participate in wildcat strikes. Making them legal doesn't mean that unions have to protect them. Hence the affirmation has no access, or don't let them come back here in the rebuttal speech saying how unions can protect wildcat strikers. That's simply not the case here. Moving on, they also talk about how wildcat strikes can happen with pre-notification. Judge, by definition, even though we consider the definition of the affirmation, wildcat strikes are wild strikes. They're not. People can know about when a strike might happen. However, when the strike does happen, there's going to be no preparation by the notified party, by the employers, by the employees. For example, again, take the school as an example. When the Virginia teachers decided to strike out, yes, parents might have known what the teachers are preparing for a strike, but when exactly that strike was going to happen, how long it's going to last for, is unknown. However, take that comparisons of that Virginia teacher teacher strike of the wildcat strike, compare that to a possible union strike that happened in LAUSD. That's when the union organized the strike with the school district, with parents, with teachers, that notify them ahead of time so that they can have proper planning for their children. That means the impacts, negative impacts of wildcat strikes does not relate back to union strikes, which is what the negation is arguing. The affirmation still holds unique harms of legalizing wildcat strikes under their world. They also talk about wildcat strikes are sustainable. Judge, again, wildcat strikes are not sustainable because of the unique harm it poses. Like my partner has mentioned, extend those points. I'll extend those points right now. So my partner has mentioned, using a 2018 Virginia teacher strike example, let's look at the extreme negative consequences for the public and the parents and the students they had to bear. Missed instructional time. The closure of schools for 9 days resulted in students missing out on the valuable instructional time, which can have a negative impact on their academic progress and achievement. Challenges for parents and working families. This is one of the most consequential things of wildcat strikes. Yes, we might know a strike is coming. However, there's no preparation by the district, by the schools to prepare for families, for the students, for people who have to work to arrange daycare for their students, to arrange care for the students. The closure of schools may pose challenges for working families who had to find alternative childcare arrangements or to take time off work to come home and take care of these children. That is the consequence. That is the unique harm of wildcat consequences. Yes, the parents might have known of these strikes ahead of time. However, when exactly what's going to happen, preparation to prepare for the strikes, to allow for substitute teachers, so on and so forth, to come into the school and allow students to continue their education was not planned for, and that is the unique harm of wildcat strikes. Hence, we should not be repealing the ban for wildcat strikes. So moving on to the on-case argument. Number one, this had one of our weakens union points still stands. The affirmation's only refutation is that wildcat strikes consist of small portions of people. Again, Judge, I've proven that's one, that's grossly misleading, and two, that's simply not true. Using the example provided by the affirmation, the 2018 Virginia teacher strike, that was an entire district of teachers participating in the wildcat strikes. The proportion of the 10 people argument simply cannot be true. That's grossly misleading, and that's simply the affirmation using one part of a fact to skew the case to their rounds. Judge, the weighing mechanism which has been shifted from net benefits to worker rights, negation still proves to why we win on both workers' rights, as wildcat strikes will not be protected under a union. And we win net benefits for society as we do not disrupt children, teachers, parents, working parents, so on and so forth. They have provided no responses to our masking, this at 2 of masking, flow that 3 judge, impact still stands, disruption in the school. This at 3 still stands of wildcat strikes decreasing union coordination. My partner has given several examples of the 2020 General Motors strikes when a union strike has already achieved the goal of the majority of the workers, and when the wildcat strike occurred, there was continuous disorganization, and at the end of the day, there was no achievements done, no progress was made on the workers' contract. Hence, this proves why union strikes work a lot better than wildcat strikes. And wildcat strikes, yes, workers might get their grievances across. However, the consequences of coming back to work, the chances, the legal repercussions of the backlash of employees getting fired, are still there. Judge, at the end of the day, I strongly urge for a vote in negation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I have a 4-minute speech coming up. Brief halftime roadmap. Order will just be going through points of clash, like world by world comparison, and then some voting issues. Time will begin on my first word. Look, judges, here are some points of clash in the round, like I've said in my roadmap. Let's first talk about the effectiveness of wildcat strikes. Like, if we just for a second operate under the AF world, we see why it's still a problem in their world where the definitions are different, right? If wildcat strikes are repealed, like workers strike whenever, like operating under the AF world, here are the problems with this. First, when workers strike like this, they are not union protected. Therefore, they are liable to be fired. The AF lives in a world where wildcat strikes, like, and I quote their second speaker, are for those 10 individuals who need to get their rights heard. And like the AF doesn't even respond to the fact that these strikes are not 100% effective, so they concede, so extend. So guess what? Here's what's gonna happen. Under the AF world, these select few workers, while they get fired because there's no union protection, and it's not even effective because they have absolutely no bargaining power whatsoever. If a company sees that 10 of their employees go on a strike, they're not going to care. However, with union efforts, with widespread unified efforts, then these companies see that it's actually a problem. And like if they don't even concede to the fact, if they concede to the fact that it's not even effective, then where's the benefit? Like, where are the workers' rights that they're achieving in this round? If the criteria for this debate is going to be workers' rights, societal benefit, whichever, they're not achieving either of those, right? Furthermore, we've talked about all the negatives of wildcat strikes in our world as well. We define wildcat strikes to mean like short scale, whether short scale or wide scale, it has a possibility of wide scale. The AF has yet again another fundamental misunderstanding. Wildcat strikes, by definition, do not notify anyone. They are completely unexpected and flow my opponent's response to this, right? And if this is the case, here are all the negatives. There's no effectiveness, there's no notification, there's no protection for those workers, all net harms. Look, judges, we've given you all these examples. The teacher's wildcat strike in West Virginia, the General Motors case, which establishes all of these harms and did not get anything achieved. However, judges, we've given you all the positive impacts of union organized strikes. We've told you time and time again that they have much more bargaining power because companies see a wide scale amount of their employees are striking. They need to address it right away. Like at the end of the day, judges, let's look at a world by world. Like I've already stated what happens in the AF world. What happens in the AF world, again, those 10 individuals strike, they have no bargaining power, they have absolutely no effectiveness, they do not get their rights back, they get fired because they're not union protected, right? AF cannot guarantee the protection of the workers' rights. AF is hypocritical to think that workers cannot pay the union fees but somehow still be protected under the unions, right? Don't let the AF claim that legalizing these strikes means unions will protect the workers, because under wildcat strikes, they're not union approved, which means they don't receive any union protection whatsoever. However, in the neg world, you see that neg guarantees union and collective bargaining still hold. You see that neg holds both weighing mechanism of societal net benefit for working families and students and worker rights, because we have proven time and time again that union strikes work, that wildcat strikes do not work. Neg guarantees public support for union strikes, strikes that do not create chaos, strikes that notify people weeks beforehand, that gain the most public support, and neg wins both worker rights and not societal benefits. So when you see that we win under both values, you see why today it's clearly a neg vote. You see that we are stronger. We are stronger together, and a union is stronger together. They have more bargaining power. They have more bargaining power for these workers' rights. They have more bargaining power for societal net benefits, because they actually notify people weeks beforehand. And so, in the end of the day, you vote for the neg that advocates union rights. Thank you.
All right, I have a final 5-minute speech for the Gov. Is everybody ready? Perfect. 5 minutes and we'll start now. I will first be addressing some small mistakes our opponents have made throughout their speeches, and then moving on to the main points of the Gov case. Firstly, our opponents continue to contradict themselves. First, they say that wildcat strikes are only a small group, thus there's no effectiveness. However, then their second speaker says that no, it's not a small group, it's a large group. In fact, in Virginia in 2018, it was an entire district that went on a wildcat strike to gain teachers their health coverage, to gain teachers their good compensation for the hard work that they do. They also contradict themselves by saying that whether it's a short scale or a large scale, and that they give no notice. That was the first contradiction. Now, the second contradiction that they say is about notification. First, they say that nobody is notified, and then in their second rebuttal speech, they say that, sure, people can be notified, but there's no preparation. Thus, what this means is that, for example, a big example our opponents give is teachers in teaching districts. Now, the parents and the teachers can be notified of the wildcat strike. However, the school itself will not have any preparation. This is what our opponent's second speaker said himself. Now, the main points you're voting for the Gov is because wildcat strikes, as a last resort, are the only way for abused workers to be heard and to get their rights and needs met. Now, our opponent's main point is that there's a big societal harm when these wildcat strikes occur. However, two responses to this. Firstly, as their second speaker said themselves, notifications can be given. So the society can be notified, however, the employers will not have any preparation. This is about our first contention of effectiveness. They need to have no preparation in order for the strike to be effective. If the employers have a way to replace the strikers, then there's no point in striking because the company continues to work. Without preparation, though, the employers are left without their company working. Thus, they must give their abused workers the rights and needs that they are asking for in order for the company to continue to work. These abused workers, wildcat strikes are the only way to get the companies to listen, for the companies to actually be impacted by strikes so that they have to listen and have to respect their workers. Now, secondly, because of this notification given out to the people, there isn't much of a societal disruption. However, we would also like to point out that at the start of our second speech, we explained that looking at the majority will often ignore worker rights in the minority. So this is the second reason why, in response to societal disruption, you'll still be voting for the gov. How can we look at the majority of people? Would we rather have the majority of society continue to function if bus drivers are being abused in harmful working conditions, if teachers don't have health coverage and they aren't compensated? Why would we want our workers to be abused in their workplaces just that we can take the bus to our workplace that isn't abusing us, just that we can put our kids into school where the teachers aren't being compensated for their jobs? We argue that it is more important to make sure that all people in our society, all workers, have their rights and needs listened to, as opposed to making sure that all people can take the bus on a given day. It is important that we look to the minorities and to the people who are being abused in our society, that when they don't have legal wildcat strikes, then we need to legalize them. Now, we give you our second contention about why they need to be legal, because when they aren't legalized, there are severe consequences for trying to wildcat strike. Our opponents try to say that even when they're legalized, unions cannot protect their workers. However, this is not what we are arguing. Right now, they're illegal because of the government. The government imposes the law that when they strike, their jobs can be taken away. However, when they're legal, as the gov is arguing, sorry?
Point of order. That's a new point that's being about the government illegalizing the walkout.
No, right, sure. So it was only in the last two speeches in which you guys had 12 minutes to give arguments that you said that don't let the affirmative say that legalization will allow unions to protect their workers. That wasn't said in your first rebuttal, in your earlier speech.
But the point that it was illegal based off of the federal government, that's a brand new point.
Right, no, but in your last speeches, you misinterpreted the resolution of what is or isn't, like how it would be made illegal or illegal, and you said that unions wouldn't be able to protect their workers. But that's not the resolution. That's not what we were saying earlier.
But the point about the federal government is still new. It's up to judges' discretion.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Let's go forward.
Okay.
Judge Bateman, you're on mute if you're trying to say something.
Yes.
Apologize. It's a boomer affliction. I know that's a horrible thing that I shouldn't say. I think that the point should be considered off time, and I am interested in my other judges' opinions on it.
That was off time, so time stops. So it's I think Judge James has said that he will take it under consideration, so we can move on.
Yeah.
Concur, Judge Shane?
I'm sorry?
Do you concur? Is that
Yeah.
your ruling on it?
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll continue. I have 40 seconds left. Thus, what the gov is arguing, it's not that unions will legalize it, it's that the government will legalize the fact that wildcat strikes are allowed, meaning that workers can now wildcat strike in order to get their needs and rights met without the fear of losing their jobs. As we stated in our first speech, this is the only way to give workers a third option. Without the legalization of wildcat strikes, they only have two. Firstly, to continue working under abusive conditions, or secondly, to have their jobs lost. However, the legalization of wildcat strikes gives them a third option, to be able to have the employers listen to their needs and have them met, and then after the strike, go back and work in a safe environment. For this reason, we strongly urge a Gov ballot. Good debate.
Thank you, everyone. This was really
Okay.
good. I
Great.
guess we can, judges, we can go offline and submit our ballots, and then we can come back here.
Great. Thank you for judging.
Give us a few minutes. Are all the judges here?
I'm here. Do we have our third judge?
I already submitted my ballot.
Okay. So does anyone of you want to share the results, or should I go ahead?
Actually, you would know better than I have not checked to see the result.
Okay. Yeah, so the results are here. So the decision was 2:1 for the Gov side. I voted for the opposition. The other two judges voted for Gov. If you'd like to share any feedback
You're breaking
or
up?
reasons for decision. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
You were breaking up. Let me close some tabs. I may have a bandwidth problem. Thank you. Could you repeat?
Yeah, I was saying the decision was 2:1 in favor of the government. And since Michelle and yourself voted for the Gov, if you want to share your thoughts first on your reasons for decision, that'll be great. And then I can maybe add some comments on why
I think you should go first, Jane. Since you were the you voted for opposition, and then we can go later.
Actually, I'm fine. I'm fine with it the way that Judge Jane wants to do it, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
It can give you a framework. If we can even alternate, if that's okay. But just to get the reasons for decision for the win out there might be helpful for all four. First of all, I want to say it was a pretty darn good debate, and I think you should all be very, very proud of yourselves. In the end, for me, I'll give you style and I'll give you substance. Substance is much more important with the way most of you look at it. But in the end, I had been leaning toward op until first speaker's final rebuttal. She did a very good job, in my opinion, of bringing us back to the Gov case. The sort of machine gun refutation style was of the opposition was frenetic and stressful. I'm not a big if you check my paradigm, I'm not a huge one for spreading. But having said that, your enunciation and your clarity while using that style was stellar. However, I do not think that in the end, opposition fully defeated the first speaker Gov's contention that in certain cases, the only way that unions can protect or workers outside the overt sanction of a union can protect their rights is to retain the right to have a wildcat strike. I would have, on a substance level, liked to, I know this is outside what you usually get in commentary, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more on both sides on the effect on society, as opposed to keeping it to members of the union. And it would have been helpful if there were more general knowledge of the nature of a wildcat strike. But given the amount that the average student knows about such things, I think that you all debated admirably. Does that help at all?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Yes, as well. Thank you.
Does the second judge want to say anything?
Okay. Sure. So I have two issues that made no, not my two issues. But there were two issues discussed in the debate, or two main questions that were discussed that prove how government won, and let me explain why government won and why opposition fell short. And firstly, should banning wildcat strikes be repealed? And secondly, where are the employees better off? So first, should banning wildcat strikes be repealed? I also agree with the previous judge that government was able to, like, at the very least gave a more dynamic and more robust case. But furthermore, they're able to like give us a more in-depth analysis than opposition. They were able to do this by providing a strategic framework that wildcat strikes are a last resort since they are risky and uncommon, and proving and they also were able to prove that you need like wildcat strikes to be legal to allow rights to be given and voices to be heard. This is crucial because since they were able to prove then that wildcat strikes are a last resort, there it proved that there was a bigger burden for opposition to prove on how wildcat strikes should not or should never be a last resort then. Because with that kind of argumentation, government was able to analyze that that you could still go through the legal process. You can still go through the like process that represents status quo. But but at the point in which you're able like exhaust all the legal means and all the means that represent status quo, you should then go through wildcat strikes. On the other hand, opposition then, insofar as you're able to explain that the harms of like wildcat strikes are there, like to weaken unions, for example, and employees being laid off more likely as a result. It's unclear as to how it would it's unclear so what is the extent of its impacts given that the framework given by government side. How would this still be likely to happen even if wildcat strikes are last resort? Like it's unclear as to how we're still going to accrue these harms even if we're still going to go through unions, for example, or still going through these legal means. But even if opposition opposition's like best argument or most potent argument is about legitimacy, it's about disruptions. It's still unclear as to how you're ultimately going to harm the process overall if you're going to allow these wildcard strikes. Given that government was able to give us a more convincing argument that given that the wildcat strikes have a like unexpected nature and even to the extent that you're able to allow voices to be heard, they're able to still then give us a more analysis on how you're still able to like capitalize on it being a last resort and rights still being able to be given overall. So in theory, government was able to give us a more in-depth analysis. But on the practicalities, like on where are the employees better off, government still won because they're still able to explain that the net benefits outweigh the net harms. They're able to do this by explaining on how, given its unexpected nature, that you're able to exert pressure to employers and even unions being unaffordable to the extent given that employees have like employees that aren't able to afford the dues that unions offer, like unions require. They're able to prove that there's still not net benefits for you to have these wildcat strikes because at the very least, you're still able to pressure employers. You're still able to get the benefits of like rights being given as a result of this unexpected nature. Comparatively, insofar as opposition is able to explain that the like legitimacy, sustainability, and solvency won't be achieved with wildcat strikes, it's unclear as to how number one it's going to happen. Again, through the framework of like it being a last resort, but secondly, how it would lead to more net harms, like how these net harms outweigh the net benefits, given that government was able to explain that you're still going to get the same like benefits of um like being heard, for example, or rights being heard, rights being given. But the debate now becomes if you're able to then achieve the benefits of like exerting pressure of like even the nature of the unions being unaffordable, how are these then how are these how does the net harms, for example, of legitimacy of like sustainability harms of sustainability of like wildcard strikes outweigh the benefits given by government? So at the end of the day, government still won. So that's it. Congratulations to government, congratulations to opposition.
Thank you.
All right, so I guess I think judges have given a lot of feedback, so I'll be very brief. Wonderful job, both of you guys. I think the only thing that leaned me towards the opposition was I put more focus on the government to define and defend things. So one thing that was unclear to me was, are we talking about a small strike? Are we talking about large scale strikes? And how are you prepared or unprepared in each of these contexts? So when we say the whole advantage is that they're effective and because you take people by surprise, that applies only when it's a small strike. If it's a large strike, you said, well, we will let the people know so that they are prepared, but we won't let the organization know so they're unprepared. And so it's sort of, you sort of conceded to what the opposition was arguing. So, and you raise these points as something that the opposition should clarify, but I would expect the government to define, because the opposition's job is to create confusion. The government's job is to defend the argument. So I would have expected you to take a stance on it and sort of define, this is what we think it is, and yes, this is how it's going to play out. But overall, again, it was very close. You guys did great and wonderful job, and good luck to the next rounds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for judging too.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, do we leave the meeting here?
Yeah, we can.
Thanks.